Thank you for the introduction. I'm Darci. I'm going to be talking about design collaboration. That's my Twitter handle if anyone cares or wants to know. In case you couldn't work it out from the accent, I am American, which means I tend to be quite informal and quite casual. So if you have any questions as I'm going through, go ahead and interrupt me. It also means I talk quite fast. So if I'm talking too fast, stick your hand in the air and tell me to slow down. I won't be offended by it. I know that I do this, and I'm trying to work on talking slower. So feedback from you guys would be great for helping make sure that I can do that. And also, I'm trying a new thing with the slides and an iPad, so if it all goes terribly wrong, I'm just going to wing it. It'll be fine. Just a quick note, for the next 45 minutes, while you're stuck in a room with me, when I talk about design, I'm talking about user experience design. So this isn't code design, it's not architecture design, it's not visual design. If you're expecting any of those, you can leave and I won't be offended by that, because this is going to be about user experience design and how to involve teams in that type of collaboration. Hopefully some of it is transferable to other skills, but just kind of so we understand what I'm talking about when I say design for the next 45 minutes, I mean user experience design. Start out with a couple of questions for you guys. Who in the room, just raise your hands, would identify themselves as a developer, engineer, or architect of some sort? Okay, so a fair few. Product owners? A couple, all right. Designer of whatever variety? All right, a few. What else have I missed? Shout out any job titles that I've not covered.
BA.
BA, okay. Oh, okay. Anything else? Nope. All right. That's good to know. Another question for kind of everyone. In terms of the user experience design process, I'm curious to understand what it is that you guys currently use and how collaborative your current environment is. So I've got a few questions around this. How many people have been involved in some sort of collaborative design session in the last 3 months? Ooh, okay. How many people get designs handed to them from a design team that they've never seen before, never heard of, and have no idea what they represent? Okay, we've got a few who cover that end of it. So what I'm going to talk about is ways to get more people involved in that design process so that the people who fall somewhere between those two extremes can hopefully become more involved, and the people who are on the one end of they just get handed random designs that they've not been involved in can hopefully start encouraging their team members to use a more collaborative process. Because designs that are just thrown at you, not very helpful most of the time, and don't really tend to fall under the whole Agile principles that I'm assuming most of us who are here either believe in or are quite curious about. So that's what we'll talk about. I'm going to disappoint everyone for a few minutes. I don't have any magic answers. All I'm going to do is talk about what I've learned and what I've tried and some of my experiences in the hope that it helps you guys figure out what to do better at your company. So there are no kind of snake oil treatments. I'm not here to tell you that there's a magic answer, that if you just go and use this magic sentence or this magic lineament, that it's all perfect. So unfortunately, there's no snake oil or silver bullets to talk about today, because it turns out that collaboration is really hard to do. Good collaboration is even harder to do. And we'll talk about a little bit of why some of that is as we go through this. There are 4 sections, kind of 4 topics that I'll talk about. They are attitude, skills, activities, and principles. Yeah, that's the list. I don't know why I read that out. The first thing we'll talk about is attitude. And I'm going to share some quite harsh words with you. If you don't have the right attitude, don't bother trying to collaborate. Because if you go into it with the wrong attitude, with the wrong approach, you'll actually do more damage to your teams and you'll do more damage to your work than you will if you didn't bother to try to collaborate in the first place. So we'll talk we'll talk for a while around what that right attitude is. Because if you go in with the wrong attitude, it's going to be a pointless exercise. You're going to waste your time, you're going to waste your team's time, and you're going to burn a lot of bridges that are probably not really what you want to accomplish. So before saying that collaboration is the answer for everything, kind of take a sense check and say, is this actually, do I believe this, and is this what I want to be doing with my team? Do I believe in what I'm going to get out of this? Because if you don't believe in it, honestly, don't even try it. It's not worth the effort. So those are the harsh words that I'm going to share with you. So don't do it just for the sake of it. And we'll talk about that later. So one of the attitudes that you have to have in order to collaborate well is a belief that good ideas can come from anywhere. That means anywhere, anyone. Just because you have designer in your title doesn't mean you suddenly know more than the developer. And just because someone has developer in their title doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to design. Everyone has different experiences, different information, different backgrounds, and all of those combined can give us better solutions than if any one person is trying to do it on their own. But if you don't believe that your team members can bring good ideas to the table, you really shouldn't be involved, you shouldn't be trying to be collaborative with them, because all you will do is be dismissive of their ideas, which will be damaging to the relationship and damaging to the product that you're trying to build. A lot of collaboration is not around specific activities, it's very much around attitudes, and it's around team, trust, relationships. So all of these things where I talk about a lot of other stuff aside from direct activities for collaboration, it's because you have to go into it the right way, and collaboration done badly can be very damaging to teams. I've seen teams where people go in and whoever's leading the collaboration session still believes that they have the right answer and they know what they're going to do, but they're having to check this off. We are a collaborative team, therefore I will run a workshop. And if they go in believing that they already know the right answer, you're wasting everyone else's time, and you're actually, just being sort of cruel is almost the right word to the team that you're working with, because you're not believing that they have anything to contribute to what you're doing. And that's quite bad for your teams and trust in general. So you really have to actually believe that good ideas can come from anywhere. Along with this, kind of what I just said, everyone should be involved. So it doesn't matter what your job title is, it doesn't matter what your seniority is. If you're on a project, you should be involved in the collaborative design sessions. It's a hard word to say. For much the same reasons that I've spoken about previously, that everyone has different experiences, different ideas, different background, different knowledge, a different point of view. And bringing all of that together can help us build better products than if we were trying to do it on our own. But if you don't believe that someone who has the wrong job title or the wrong seniority, if you don't think they should be involved, then bringing them in and pretending to listen to their ideas is not going to be very useful. Unfortunately, most people are quite good at picking up on whether or not their input is valued. So if you don't truly believe in these things, you can do more damage by trying to pretend that you think it's valuable. I have a real pet peeve about superheroes, rock stars, ninjas, whatever the latest term is that's in job titles, I find completely ridiculous. And these aren't the attitudes that you want on your team. Do you really want a superhero on your team who saves in when the world's about to end and saves the day? Well, hopefully your project's not in a situation where the world's about to end, because that's a bad sign. But you don't want one person who's solely responsible for saving the world. This is meant to be kind of a team sport and a team activity. So the idea of superheroes, not very helpful to design processes or collaboration. Rock stars, they've got a bad reputation for wanting all green M&Ms in their dressing room, or whatever the reputation is. These aren't the kind of people you want to be collaborating with. These aren't the kind of people you want on your teams. And ninjas, I've never understood why that turns up in job titles, because I don't know how that helps anyone. But anyway, the idea here is that you actually have to believe that collaboration is better than these kind of individual types of people who you end up with on projects. I think I've probably said enough about that. In collaboration, for the activities that we'll talk about in a few minutes, most of what we need to recognize is that this is around quantity of ideas rather than quality. And then I qualify that to say at first, because eventually you do want the good ideas that you're going to design into your software. But a lot of collaboration is just getting things out of people's heads and onto paper and into kind of the world where everyone else can comment on it and then think about it. So anything that focuses too much on quality for the initial steps of collaboration can be quite damaging, because this is just about getting as many ideas out as possible from as many people and from as many kind of backgrounds and disciplines as you can get. I promise eventually we'll stop talking about attitude, but we're still in the attitude section right now. Don't say no. So if someone suggests an idea, even if you think it's the worst idea in the world, during the collaboration section, it's not the time to say no. It's the time to say yes and, which is a technique stolen from impromptu actors, or improvisation actors, to use yes and rather than no or yes but. So it's something that you build on an idea rather than shut it down. And when you're collaborating and when you're trying to gather ideas, what you want to be doing is building on ideas, not rejecting ideas. Because if you reject an idea, you've shut down an entire stream of thought. And maybe the initial thought isn't what you wanted, but if you build on it a little bit, you may get to something that's brilliant and amazing. But you can only do that if you actually go in with an attitude of this is about getting as many ideas as we can and building on them rather than trying to shut them down. So there's also, I think What If comes from Pixar. They use something called plussing, which I hate as a word, so I'm pretty sure they've made that word up. And here's a link, and this will all be, the slides will be available, so don't worry about trying to write down these links. So Pixar uses this thing called plussing, which is if someone says a crazy idea, people need to think about it, and then rather than saying, no, that's crazy, you kind of try to take a twist on it. You take an element of that idea and go, oh, what if we use this and do something else? So it's that concept of always building on an idea rather than shutting anything down. There are lots of other ways to do this. Like I said, improvisation has a lot of techniques for how do you build on an idea. Because if you're standing, if you think about improv acting, you've got two people or more standing in front of each other, and someone says, let's build a rocket to Mars. The other person can't say, no, that's a crazy idea, because the scene is over, and there's nowhere that you can build from that. But if the person responds with, yes, that's brilliant, and we need to pack a picnic lunch, then there's somewhere to build from, and there's a further conversation that can happen, where no, or that's not going to work, really shuts down conversations and ideas. And unfortunately, because people are people, and they tend to be fairly sensitive about their ideas, if they notice that their ideas are being shut down, they'll disengage from the process. But if they feel valued in the process and they feel that they're a part of it and their ideas are contributing to where the project is going, people are much more open and willing to take risks and suggest ideas that may get you somewhere brilliant. Not always, sometimes. Still in the attitude stuff. Attitudes need to be around agreement, participation, acknowledgement of value. So this is very much around how people perceive collaboration. Collaboration shouldn't be negative, it shouldn't be argumentative, it should be around agreeing on the goal, it should be around agreeing on the outcomes, it should be around participation of entire teams. Anyone who wants to participate should be welcome to, but often it shouldn't be mandatory, because if someone's not in the right frame of mind for collaborating, it's not going to be a very valuable session for people to do. But then also, a lot of it's around acknowledgement of value. You have people on your team who are smart, knowledgeable, they know what they're talking about, involve them in the team. If they're handed a solution to implement, it's much harder to believe in that solution than if they are a part of creating that solution and finding that solution from nothing. So collaboration, it's a set of activities, but it's also very much an underlying belief in how teams are structured. And it very much ties into motivation around getting work done and kind of feeling valued and a part of a team. Collaboration can help with all of these things, or if done badly, can be extremely damaging to the teams. Which is why I've talked so much about attitude, because it's really quite key to doing collaboration well. So the next thing we'll talk about, it really is a different color, I swear. It just doesn't show up very well on the projector. We'll talk about skills, because collaboration generally requires a slightly different set of skills than what most of us are prepared for. And I have to say, in most of my my kind of years of training at companies and education, no one ever taught the skills for collaboration. You're put into a group and assumed that you can work together. I don't know, maybe it's different over here, maybe it's different, for different people. I have never been taught how to collaborate. People just assume that it'll, smart people will figure it out. And actually the reality is that there are a certain set of skills that are very much required for good collaboration. Everyone can learn them, but I think a lot of companies are quite bad about actually helping people get that training that's necessary to improve upon their collaboration skills. So one of the skills, arguably it's an attitude, but I stuck it under skills, is understanding what collaboration is and being able to explain that to the people you're trying to collaborate with. So collaboration is not the same thing as compromise. There are lots of studies that have been done around good ideas, around how how people collaborate together. There's a quite famous one around providing people with a list of items, and I think it's like a 50 item list. And the teams are meant to choose, if we're stranded in the middle of a desert, which 6 items would you want off of that list of 50 in order to survive and get out of the desert? Individuals, when they do this activity, generally choose items that they still wouldn't survive and make it out of the desert, but there's kind of a ranking of how well they would survive. And they're generally, kind of okay, they're at the low end of surviving, and based on the items that they choose, but they might survive. When you then put teams together, as teams of, I think the number's around 6, it turns out that because then they end up compromising, the survival rate actually drops, because they end up going, oh, well, okay, well, you think we should have this item, and you think we should have this item, so we'll just take both of those, even though they're no longer connected and can't work together. So the idea of compromise is to kind of try to make everyone happy, but then everyone ends up being unhappy in a lot of compromises. So we need to understand that collaboration is not compromise. This isn't designed by committee. It's not, well, we need to take one idea from everyone who is in the room and we put it together and it's, a dog's breakfast or whatever that phrase is. It's a very British phrase. I'm not sure I used that right, but hopefully. You don't want to end up in that situation, and it's actually kind of a skill to understand what is collaboration and how do you do it well. The next thing, kind of related to collaboration, is not compromise. Collaboration is not using HIPPO, which I don't know if people know this, highest paid person's opinion, which is kind of something that happens a lot. If you have a vice president or a CTO sitting in the room with you, a lot of people will simply defer to their opinion. But actually, often they're not necessarily the right people to make a final decision. And that can be evidence. They've hired a team of smart people to do this for them. If they could do it themselves, they wouldn't need the entire team that they've hired to do this work. So the idea of actually letting these people kind of make final decisions simply because they're the highest paid person in the room, is a little bit backwards in thinking. And this is very tempting to kind of fall into that trap of like, oh, well, my boss said that this is what they wanted, so I'm just going to do what my boss said. But it needs to be quite carefully handled in terms of collaboration to avoid falling into that trap, which is why I've put understanding collaboration as a real skill, because you need to understand how to have those conversations with that person to say, yes, we appreciate your input, but we're going to try something else for now. Or learning to have those conversations about not shutting down their ideas and building on their ideas to something that's even better. But understanding exactly what collaboration means is certainly something that needs to be focused on if we're trying to be more collaborative at work. One of the most difficult skills in collaboration is learning to define a problem. And that sounds stupid, but how many people have ever had a situation where the boss has come to them and said, I need you to solve this problem, and they describe the problem, and you start solving it, only to find out that you're solving the wrong problem, because the way it was described to you wasn't really good enough. So I think there's a very good skill around defining a problem so that you can communicate it easily to other people. Down at the bottom here, I've got 3 examples. I've seen collaborative sessions where people walk in and say, we're designing a homepage. Go. Well, that's not a very good problem. It's not a well-defined problem. It has no scope, it has very little information about it. I mean, hopefully you know what company you're building the homepage for, but much beyond that, you know, what is the goal of the page? Who is it for? Where is it meant to fit in? Where is it meant to fit into kind of the marketing activities or the business activities of the company you're working for? So design a homepage gets a frowny face for its problem definition. Design a homepage for a pet shop. We've got a little more information, but not a whole lot more information. So there could still be a lot of questions around what is it that we're trying to design. So in terms of defining a problem, this one still not very good in terms of helping people understand what it is they're trying to do and why you're collaborating on any particular topic. This last one, design a homepage so busy parents, so busy parents can find an appropriate pet for their children. That problem definition gives you a target, it gives you some information about who you're designing this for, what it is you're trying to design, and how you would know whether or not you were successful. Because I see lots of terrible homepages. It ticks the box, it's a homepage, but it might not actually solve any of the problems. For this one, and it still might not be the best problem definition I've ever seen, but it's in comparison, it's the best one here. This gives you information about who is it that you're building it for. So we have busy parents. It's going to be different than if you're trying to build it for, 23-year-old college graduates who are trying to find their first job. So we identify who we're trying to build it for. We identify what their goals are. They're trying to find an appropriate pet for their children. So that gives you some kind of criteria to measure your design against. It says, have we addressed these people and this particular problem? So defining a problem to be solved in collaboration is the first step in being able to do collaboration well, because you need to provide yourself and your team with enough information to participate in the activity as well as they can. And that's providing them information about who is this being built for, what is it, so it's who, what, why, when is probably while you're sitting in the room. But it helps to start to answer a lot more of those questions. But defining the problem really is the first step to good collaboration, and defining a problem isn't necessarily done with other people. It may be sitting in a room by yourself for a little while and trying to work out what information do we know, what information is useful, what information do we not know yet, but this design session should help us answer those questions, and then how do you communicate that information succinctly and clearly to the audience who's going to be helping you and do the design work or the collaboration. Facilitation. It's big and scary, and lots of people are not very good at it, and lots of people are very good at it. So facilitation, again, it's one of those kind of soft people skills that doesn't really turn up in a lot of corporate training or a lot of university degrees that I've ever seen. But facilitation, because of teams and the way that companies are changing, is a more important skill every day. So I'm not going to talk a lot about what goes into facilitation, because there are entire books and courses around how to become a good facilitator. But what I will say about this is some of it is simply around finding a mentor, finding someone at your company who you like the way that they facilitate, working with them, but then also finding a way to be true to yourself, because facilitation is a very vulnerable place to be. It's a very personal place to be, and you have to, you can't fake facilitation. You actually need to believe in the way that you're doing it and be true to who you are as a person and as a facilitator. So lots of different people have different approaches to facilitation. When I first started facilitating sessions, I made some horrible mistakes and have done horrible sessions that were disasters, but I also found some really good people who I respected and trusted their facilitation skills, and I worked with them to try to find my own way through facilitation to understand if this is my goal, this is how I as a person with my skills and my capabilities and my personality can get to that goal. And that journey is going to be different for everyone, which is why I don't detail what I consider to be the best facilitation skills, because that's something that everyone needs to find for themselves. But it's definitely, as companies are changing the way that they do work, as companies are changing the way that they collaborate, facilitation skills are never going to be pointless. So I would encourage everyone to, gain some of those facilitation skills, try facilitating sessions. And one thing that I really like about the Agile world is because of retrospectives and because of stand-up meetings and because of planning meetings and all of the, kind of rituals that people sometimes dislike about Agile, it gives people a lot of very safe spaces to start to learn facilitation. And so doing things like finding a co-facilitator to run a retrospective. It's a safe environment, well, hopefully it's a safe environment. It gives you the opportunities to start to understand the people dynamics that go on in meetings and discussions, and then you can start to expand those skills from running a fortnightly retrospective into starting to run design collaborations and sessions, or whatever other meetings are important to your business and your function. So I'll stop talking about facilitation, but it's really important. In terms of design collaboration, I hate to say this, but I'm going to have to say it. Facilitation is more important than design. If you're a brilliant designer and you can't communicate with people in an effective way, your designs are not going to help your team or your company or yourself. So actually it was kind of, and maybe it's not even facilitation, it might be people skills, but all of that kind of information and the soft skills are going to help a lot more than being the most brilliant designer in the world, because that isolation is what we're trying to eliminate. So being able to bring that design skill into a session where everyone else gets to participate is really what design is moving towards. So within the design, kind of UX design world, there's a lot of conversation recently about getting away from being that superhero designer and moving into what's called a design facilitation role. And that's really what a lot of this is about, is that as things become more public and more people get involved in them, the actual, I know exactly when to use a checkbox or a radio button becomes slightly less important, and being able to have those conversations with your team and with your superiors, bosses, whatever, customers, and that starts becoming actually where the design skills really matter. Now we get to talk about activities, and as we go through this, you'll notice that there are many variations on a theme. And we'll talk about the themes at the end, but you'll start to notice some trends. So there's an activity called design charrettes, and I really love that word because I don't know if it's true or not, but I was told that this word comes from the French word for chariot, because architecture students, as they were like racing to get to school on time, were trying to finish off the last of their architecture designs. So it was this kind of rushed, last minute, get the ideas out on paper as they're heading into class. I don't know how many architecture students really would have been heading to class in a chariot, but I just love that idea, so it has stuck with me since I was told that. But this is kind of a specific activity that you can try. There are a couple of rules around it. Anyone can participate. You need to identify the problem well for the participants. And then it involves individual silent sketching for 5 minutes. So you give people a stack of paper and some Sharpies, or other pens, but Sharpie is quite popular. And you let them sketch for 5 minutes around that problem. And it's silent, so there's no conversation, there's no kind of sharing of ideas. It really is one person's ideas out onto paper. And then at the end of the 5 minutes, each person gets 2 minutes to explain their ideas and answer any questions that anyone in the team has about that. And these are 2 links that both have articles around kind of variations on the design charrettes. And the goal of this one is to come out with as many ideas as possible in a short amount of time. So you don't come into these ideas and go, that's a terrible idea, we could never do that, that's impossible. It's getting as many ideas out onto paper as possible, and then being able to answer questions around those ideas, but not really building on those ideas. So it is truly just, people have ideas in their head, get them out onto paper, because once they're on paper, in follow-up sessions, people can talk about them a bit more, they can build on them, they can do all of this. So this is truly about kind of generation of ideas. There's a similar activity that is referred to as 365. Again, anyone can participate. First step is to identify the problem. And then each participant is asked to create 3 to 6 sketches. And often they're given what's called a 6-up sheet of paper that has 6 blocks on it. and people can use those kind of little squares to fill in the different ideas that they have. And then what's sort of fun around facilitating a 365 session is you go through the whole, okay, you've got paper in front of you, I need you to create 3 to 6 ideas, use the paper, this is the problem that we're talking about. Oh, and by the way, you have 5 minutes starting now. And as soon as you say that, or like starting now, people panic and immediately start putting stuff on paper. And it's really interesting to watch. They're kind of thinking about the idea, and then you put the pressure on that you've got 5 minutes to come up with 6 ideas. And the ideas that come out of this can be brilliant. Some of them are rubbish, but some of them are brilliant. And because of the way that this is set up, that there's no pressure to do it. It's 3 to 6 ideas. It could be a couple of ideas. It could be 3 ideas about one very small detail, or it could be 6 ideas about kind of the whole flow. It's very undefined, but lots of people will participate in this. So I've seen chief technology officers come in and go, I don't know how to draw, I don't know how to sketch, and you put this in front of them, and they're brilliant at it, and they're amazing, and they want to come back and do it more often because it's different from what they usually do, and they find it actually quite. Once they get over the initial nervousness, they find it quite fun to participate in because it is so different, and it unleashes this kind of creative side that they don't usually get to play with. So after that 5 minutes of 3 to 6 ideas, often what you do is then pair people up. So the person you're sitting next to, you talk about the ideas that you came up with, they talk about their ideas, and then you have another 5 minutes as a group to come up with the next set of 3 to 6 ideas. It may be building on the first set of ideas, or it may be a departure from those ideas because after talking to each other, you've come up with an even better idea. And then you do that again, so that you start out, it's individuals, and then it's a group of 2, and then it's a group of 4. And by the time you get to the group of 4, after they've done their sketching, you have them show the best ideas to everyone on the team. So it's a bit of a show and tell of, this is what we've come up with. Sometimes they go into details of this is where it came from to understand the evolution and the journey. But by the time you get to the end, you have some really good ideas. You've had that initial step similar to the charrette, where you have loads of ideas on paper, but this activity then gives the team a bit of an opportunity to refine that down to a few slightly more qualified ideas that can be used for the project. And again, here's a reference to some information about using that activity. It's another activity, lots of activities. Called Design Consequences. The first 3 steps probably look quite familiar by now. Anyone can participate, identify the problem. I'm sketching for about 5 minutes around trying to solve that problem. The twist on Design Consequences is at the end of the 5 minutes, rather than talking about your ideas or sharing them with the world, you hand your paper to the person next to you. You can do it to the left or the right, doesn't matter. I wrote to the left and I was like, all right, actually you can do it either way. So you take your sketches and you hand them to the person next to you. And then without explaining what you meant by that or what was going on, they then have to develop what happens next from that, what details are missing, or if this were a journey through a series of screens or steps, what would happen next? What would they expect to see next? What would they expect to have happen next? What would they expect to do on the screens that you just handed them? And the interesting thing about this isn't necessarily around a kind of refinement of ideas. This is starting to illustrate to people the importance of good design, because if you just get sketches in front of you and no explanation, no idea what they're kind of about other than that identification of the problem, that's the same thing that we do to our customers and our users. If we've designed a brilliant homepage, we're not there to explain it to our customers when they turn up on that homepage. They get it out of the blue, no explanation, landed on it by surprise, and they need to figure out what happens next. And so the Design Consequences really helps kind of drive home that idea of a lot of this needs to be very self-explanatory, because we're not going to be there to explain to our customers or anyone what happens, or you should press this button, or you should put your information into this field. They need to figure it out on their own. So this is kind of an attempt to replicate a bit of that within a team, but then understand that every design decision that is made, it does have consequences for our customers, but it also has consequences for us in how we build it. And so you can get some interesting designs around that. And again, there's more information for reference afterwards. lots and lots of other options for activities around design. There's one called Design Studio Method, which unfortunately Adrian is talking about 2 rooms down from us right now, so there's a little bit of conflict in the schedule today. But there's lots of information online about Design Studio Method. It basically is split into 5 chunks, and it's illuminate, sketch, present, critique, and iterate, which kind of sounds quite similar to the previous activities, but there are always variations on how to do this. Whiteboard sessions. If you've got a problem and you don't have this whole big formal meeting that we've been talking about, get people gathered around a whiteboard, hand someone a whiteboard marker and start drawing out what could happen, draw out options, cross stuff out, erase it, build on it, and then at the end, take pictures of it, because there's nothing worse to know than there's a solution on a whiteboard and then someone else erased the whiteboard. So remember to take pictures at the end of whiteboard sessions. And something else that I've seen a lot of companies do, and I've had a lot of good luck with this, is if you do have designs, whether they came from a collaborative place or not, print them out, hang them on a wall, provide Sharpies and a Post-it note, and ask anyone in the company to provide comments on those designs, those journeys, those flows, and those comments could be anything. It could be, I don't understand this step, or this button doesn't make any sense, or this information is missing. And so I did this recently at a company. This sounds like a strange story, but we had some information. We hung the flow on the wall, and we provided Post-it notes and Sharpies, and we said, everyone, please go look at this. This is the new journey that we're proposing for our customers. Please have a look at it, provide any comments that you can think of. And the designs had actually come from our team in France. And so it was all in English, but the design had come from the team in France. And one of the comments that we got from the English team was that putting all of the dimensions in centimeters for a product doesn't really work in the UK. And all of us who'd looked at it had never thought about the fact that in the UK, inches and centimeters are still both used as kind of dimensions. And so we were actually able to modify the design to put in the second set of dimensions, and the feedback that we've gotten from customers on that has been really good, because in the UK, there is still that divide of some people know centimeters and some people know inches. And the only reason that we caught that particular mistake, or opportunity for improvement, is because we hung it on the wall and we asked people to provide comments. And because it's kind of anonymous, you write something on a Post-it note, there's not a lot of ego going into it, so people are quite open about their comments and their feedback, and that can be incredibly helpful. So most companies that I've worked at, there's always a wall somewhere that has the latest designs up there, and then a stack of Post-it notes and Sharpies. And that's quite useful. It's not real-time collaboration, but it's still getting everyone involved in the process so that their feedback is valued. And then also, depending on where you are in the process, another company that I work with, they got to a point where they were fairly close to releasing a new set of apps for a wide variety of devices. And what they did is they got a load of devices in, they put the prototype or the about to be released version on those devices and invited anyone in the company to come in. They offered, pizza and soda at lunchtime, but said, come in, play with these devices, play with our apps on these devices, and tell us what you think. And there's a little bit of concern, are 2 people going to show up or 200 people going to show up? And in the end, it turns out that about 35 people showed up and provided really good feedback around, have you considered doing this other thing? What about this topic over here? And all of that came about is simply because the design team and the tech team, because they were involved in this as well, was very open to say, this is what we're doing. We're a big company. Not everyone gets to see all of our projects. We want to invite everyone in to participate because this will impact everyone in the company. And so that was a very successful session. And now, other people in the company who don't know what that particular team is doing, they understand more about it and they come in and ask questions because they think it's kind of the cool team right now. And it's simply because they were very open about what they're doing and they invited feedback and invited collaboration into their design process. So it kind of depends on where you are. If you're still at the paper stage, this is easier. If you've got something that you can build and play with, that can be a very good way to get collaboration and feedback from people. Just in case you missed the themes as we were going through there, I've identified them for you. Post-its, Sharpies, get everyone involved. Quantity versus quality. At some point you need to make that decision. A lot of the activities we've talked about so far have been focused on quantity But at some point you need to make the decision that we've got enough ideas, now we need to refine them down into the one good idea or two good ideas that we carry forward. Make everything visible and everything open. So hopefully those themes were apparent, but I thought I'd just spell it out in case I had forgotten to mention it while I was going through. Now we'll talk about principles, which is, it'll make sense in a moment. Ties in with that theme thing I just talked about. So I feel like I only have like 3 messages, which is talk to people, be open, and invite feedback, but that's what collaboration is about. So make everything open and visible. If you go into a session and you don't want to share ideas, you don't want to share the problem, you're going to have a rough session. So you make everything open and visible. Within a company, obviously there are kind of commercial secrets occasionally that need to be kept, but working on a project, the team should know what's going on, so be open and visible about what's happening. Do less more often. So with design collaboration, you don't want to be designing the entire system or the entire website because it's too much. So tackle small problems as often as you can. So it's that idea of being able to identify the problem that you're trying to solve, but make sure that that problem is something that you can actually get ideas on in a short amount of time. So it's tackling small issues frequently rather than trying to do the whole thing at once. And then doing less more often gives you opportunities to build trust and work with your entire team. So rather than designers being kind of locked off in a corner somewhere and they do their little black magic and come out with designs, doing less more often helps to build that trust and work with teams. Yes?
So what we find in our company is our designers say that they need to know everything before they can design.
No one really needs to know everything.
So they need the bigger picture of the project. They need the bigger picture in order to be able to build a design from beginning to end, because they need to know the full journeys of the different scenarios, etc. How does that work? How do you stop that mentality?
That's an entirely different talk that I actually have given it at one point. For me, there's finding that balance between knowing enough to know where the details fit in, but not needing to design all of those details up front. So one example that I've experienced and then used with other designers is if you're building a purchasing process, so a payment, you need a shipping address, you need a credit card, you need lots of information. In order to build that journey and to focus on the address bit, you need to know that at some point you'll get a credit card number, but you don't need to know all of the details of what go into that credit card kind of gathering piece. So it's trying to find that right balance of, you can't just say, design an address field, because that's too abstract and you don't have any context for it. But if you say it's a purchasing process, we know we need an address, we know we need a credit card, we know we need whatever other information. We know all of this, but we're going to come to these later. We can then focus on the detail that's important at that point in time. And the reality is that fear is entirely that. It's fear and it's lack of trust, because if they're told, design an address field with no information about it, where it fits in, what it's for, why it's going to be used, then there's fear that they'll do it wrong and have to go back and change something. But if they have the confidence that they know enough of the big picture without those details, then generally people are kind of go, okay, I understand that this is coming later, you've promised me that this is later, I can now put it out of my mind because I know it's here and I can focus on this here. What happens is when they're just told, we'll give you those details later, the mind gets preoccupied with, well, what are those details? I don't know enough to do this. It could be anything that's coming next. But being able to provide that kind of confidence of, we know what's out there, we know where we're going to take you, but we don't know those details quite yet, that can help kind of find that right balance and let people focus on the details that they need to at the time without spending all of their mental energy worrying about what's coming next. It's not an easy problem to solve at all. Does that in any way help?
It does, to an extent. It's just, we find that our sort of UX guys, before they're going to design, they need to know scenarios after scenario so that they can get their principles and the whole sort of idea of what the user experience should be. And I just think that you just need to know there is a problem, we need that fixed, and you just get an overall journey rather than every little bit. That's what I don't get.
It's fear of the unknown, because they don't know what's going to happen next, and if they're surprised by something, No one wants to find out that they've done their job wrong. So with all the designers I've ever worked with, that tell me more, tell me more, tell me more is simply trying to address a fear that they don't know what's happening next. So trying to find that balance of, we know a little bit about what's coming next and we'll tell you as much as we know, but we do need to get on with some of the details. That can just help, because it's around building that trust and letting the fear kind of go from the team. Because if they're scared of what's next, they're scared of being told that they've done something wrong, they're scared of being surprised by something, then it is just lack of trust in the team and a bit of internal fear, and trying to find ways to build that trust that if the world changes tomorrow, your designs won't have been wrong, they will have simply been for an old question, and we will trust you to answer the new question when that question arises. That can be quite comforting, but that desire to know everything really does come down to a bit of a lack of trust within the team. So trying to find ways to address that problem will go a long way to solving we need more information, and they often feel disconnected, like, you need information, why am I talking about trust? But it is that kind of faith that they know what's happening. Yep. I've mentioned this before, I'll mention it again, it's important. Don't involve people just for the sake of it. If you don't mean it, if you don't want them there, don't involve them, because it will be damaging to those relationships, and it will be damaging to the trust in the team. I've gone into design sessions, and the person facilitating, they thought they knew the answer. So I was wasting my time, they were wasting the time of the entire team. And not only was it a waste of a couple of hours, the next time that I got an invite from this person, I didn't really feel that it was going to be a good use of my time. So they burnt bridges with quite a lot of the team. We all went into the first session in kind of good faith that they really wanted our ideas, and then it turns out that they didn't. It really is quite damaging to relationships and trust. So if you're getting ideas from everyone else simply to use your own, it's not collaboration. Don't try to pretend that it's collaboration. We're nearing the end. So we talked about attitude, skills, activities, and principles. This is great. If we go through all these activities, we've got like stacks and stacks of paper with Sharpie sketches on them, and most of them don't make sense outside of that session anyway. So the question is, what do we do next? We've got lots of ideas, we've got lots of sketches, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, but we've got lots of them because we were focusing on quantity over quality. And then the question is, well, that's great. What do we do now? And this is where actually the design role really comes into it. The designer shouldn't be the sole source of ideas and inspiration. What they should be doing is taking these ideas, choosing, combining, improving, expanding on those ideas to come to the final recommendation. So all of this collaboration, I have never in my life seen it provide the final recommendation for a design. But what it has done is provided all of the ideas and the pieces that can then be chosen, combined, improved, and expanded upon to create that final recommendation. So there is still a job as a designer. It doesn't need to be entirely about someone facilitating lots of sketching. That only gets you partway to the answer. So the reality is, after all of this collaboration, there is still the need for someone, hopefully a designer, to be taking these ideas and putting them into a form that can be used as a recommendation for whatever it is that you're building. But it's important to note that collaboration is not the final step. It's very much just a step in the process, and you do still need that design skill to understand what to do with all of those ideas and those massive stacks of sketches, which I always struggle to get rid of. So I still have sketches on my desk from sessions 6 months ago, because they're kind of nice to go back through and look at where the ideas came from. But also, if you're stuck on another problem, going back and looking at old solutions to problems sometimes gives you that inspiration of, oh yeah, that problem that we had to, or that solution we rejected for a previous problem, it's perfect for this problem. So kind of being able to gather those ideas and keep them in mind for later use is part of the kind of new definition of this design skill, because design is no longer going off in a room and drawing pretty pictures and expecting that to be what the software looks like. Design is now much more around gathering ideas, being able to understand what to do with them, and making good use of them, involving the entire team in a very collaborative manner. So that's the last slide. I'm not sure what time we're finishing.
We are out of time.
Oh no!
But,
I thought we had time for questions.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No, if there's any real burning questions, I'm sure everyone won't mind a couple of minutes before they go to the lunch if we've got any.
And I'll be hanging around, so
Yeah,
come
and we do
find
have
me.
you will be at the beach party this
Yes,
evening?
I will be at the beach
So
party.
anyone can pick our brains this evening as well, perhaps. Do we have any questions that people want to ask right now, or are we desperate for our lunches? I think that looks like a lunch.
Yeah.